Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome to another episode of B is for Build. I'm Chris. We're back working on the 2JZ BRZ. And what we're gonna do in this episode is I'm gonna wire up the start button from the BRZ inside that cabin to turn on all the auxiliaries with the first start, and on the second press, start the car up. At least that's the game plan. I've heard it can be actually kind of tricky, but I really want to get it to function just like OEM, and that's how it works on a BRZ if you don't have one. First start turns on all your auxiliaries, first button press I mean, second button press kicks on the ignition of the engine. I will also go through the detailed explanation of how to wire up your own 2JZ. If you want to do a standalone, not a standalone, sorry. If you want to do your own 2JZ swap into any car and you want to bring along the 2JZ ECU and figure out how to make it start like I just did in the last episode on this build, I will walk through that in detail about how to do that. And I will give you guys timestamps so you can skip that if you don't want to watch it. Stay tuned. Before I get started, I want to take a second out to thank our sponsor for this episode. This episode is proudly sponsored by Leatherman Tools. Leatherman Tools is a great company that makes awesome multi-tools like these ones. You probably look familiar. These are Leatherman, and they also make things just like your good old handy pocket knife like this. They have sent me a couple tools that are now everyday part of my tool set. These go on my camera bag right here, and then I got a big boy OHT that I put on my in my toolbox whenever I travel and stuff like that. They're great. I actually just took these down to California when we went to do drifting with the G35, and they came in handy more than once. Leatherman Tools has launched a Tool Tales campaign, which is a pretty cool thing. It's where you can go online and you can tell your story about how Leatherman Tools have helped you out, how they've saved the day, whatever. My own tool tale is that when I was a really young kid, I was out fishing with my dad, and I was riding my lure on the wake of the boat, and I was playing around as kids do, and I was kind of jumping my lure around, and it got a little bit deep in the water, and I yanked on my rod, and the lure went flying through the air and caught me in my finger. At which point we had to turn around, go back to camp, and I had a fish hook like firmly stuck in my finger for half the day. And my dad and myself, we couldn't get it out, and we had a lot of trouble. But luckily, Leatherman did save the day. Not a lot of people bring things like heavy duty pliers on a camping trip, or the cutting thing that they got down there in the middle, and that's what really saved the day with me. I was able to cut that fish hook, and it was like a triple barbed fish hook, and I was able to cut it off of the rest of them and kind of push it through my finger. But my dad thought I was gonna have to go to the hospital in the morning. I was gonna have to go to sleep with a fish hook stuck in my finger, but luckily, thanks to that Leatherman tool, we were able to get it out. So that was pretty cool. That's my best moment, or best memory that I have of using Leatherman tools. But they're kind of a staple in most tackle boxes and hunting gear and all sorts of great stuff. So if you're interested and you have your own cool Leatherman tool tale, share it with me, share it with everybody. Hit the link in the description, and you can, they got this new web platform, it's really cool, and you can post your Leatherman tool tale and then you can share it with everybody else. If you got a cool one, share it with me. Maybe I will share it on the channel or our Instagram. So thank you so much to Leatherman for sponsoring this episode. Very cool company, 100% stand behind it, and I've used their tools for pretty much as long as I can remember, since I was a kid and I could have finally, I could get my own. So thanks to them for that, and check out that link in the description. All right, let's get to work. This mess here is what's left over of all the wiring situation that I did when we hot wired the car. So you got the ECU just kind of floating right there, all these wires right here running down to a battery that goes on a skateboard, because apparently you're not supposed to put batteries on the concrete, so skate it. So the first thing that I'm gonna go do is I need to run down to a electrical supply store, like some sort of store that sells the things that we need, because what we need to do is a lot of distribution. So for instance, here we have 5 or 6 wires, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, yeah, 6, and then up here we got 2 or 3, and they all need to go to the same place. They all need to go to ground. So that's a pretty common thing that you're gonna see here. We're gonna have more bundles that go to power and everything like that. So what I need to get is some sort of clean distribution method. Putting them all together with a bolt is not a good final answer. It'd probably work for a long time actually, but I'm not comfortable with that. We're trying to do this the right way. So for instance, here's a lot of the hot wires that we ran, and you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that need to be distributed to one hot wire. So I'm gonna run down there, get some distribution blocks, and I also need to get something that can hold some relays, because we're gonna be using automotive relays. This might be a decent spot to throw them, but we're gonna be using automotive relays to relay power signals. So I'm gonna run down there, see what I can find, and I'll be right back. Well, it took me going to 6 stores just to find something that will kind of work, and this is not optimal. So this is for a model train set. I found it at a hobby store, And what it does is you're meant to plug in your positive here and your ground here, and it distributes that across here by this circuit board in the back, binding all these together. That's not what we need. I need them to be in separate connections and different things like that. So I'm just going to take the cutoff wheel, and anything that's off of this band right here we can cut off. So I'll cut that, into one nice strip, and then we'll probably cut the thing in the middle, and we'll do that on both sides, and we should get 4 little blocks of 6, which is about what we need. But first, we need to put together a game plan of what we're going to do. Okay, the way I'm thinking this is going to work shouldn't be too technically difficult. It just revolves around some signal wiring, some relays, and then we plug everything kind of back in after we've done that. So the idea here that I have is I'm going to put the battery back in. We're going to trace the starter wire. Once you hit that starter button under the in the dash, it has got to send power somewhere into this stock OEM BRZ fuse box. I've been talking with this guy named Kyle Chansey. I'll put his Instagram in the description below. Check him out. He's done a full single turbo, standalone ECU, manual CD009 transmission swap into his own FRS. And we were talking, and he knows, he's pointed out to me where there's a signal power. Like so you hit the button in the dash, it sends power to here. I can pick up on that. From that, we're going to split off into multiple relays that'll manage different things. So some things off the top of my head that I know we need to go to is power to the ECU. We have power to the injector coil packs. The coil packs and the injectors. We have power to the fuel pump, and we have power to the fan up front. Those are all things that I want to turn on right when the user, the driver, myself, hits the power button the first time. The second time I want to try and start the car, and that's a different thing. So the first thing that I want to set up is that signal wire, which means installing the battery and that stuff. Okay, I was able to find the signal wire. If you guys are trying to do this at home, the one I'm going to go ahead and do my test with or continue to work with is right here. There's a relay. I popped it out, put it right there. I've been working on it for a second. And then this one right here, the bottom left connection, that is the connection that has very, very low draw at all times. So it's like, you know, less than 1 volt, like it's close to 0.2 of a volt. And then when I hit the switch inside, it will be at full power from the car. So now I'm going to go ahead and try and use this relay as my first test relay and show you guys how that works. This is, though, has power sent to it, so I don't know if that's a small enough amount of power to flip this relay or not. I'll explain relays a little bit more in a second. Each relay has a different level of like sensitivity of what it takes to flip the electromagnet inside of this to bridge this connection. As you can see, there's 4 of these, and it's basically like a switch where you send, well, I'll get into it in a second. So I have to wire all this stuff up, and then we'll test it with this one. If this one doesn't work, I have extras of these big guys, and I'm pretty positive those will. Okay, we got everything working. It seems like a whole mess of wires and stuff like that, but I'm going to explain it all right now. If you're a big car enthusiast, you already know exactly how this stuff works. Feel free to skip over it. But for all those out there that are trying to learn, if you wanted to install like glow lights on your car or exterior lighting or like a light bar, LED light bar, any of that stuff, or just, you know, power your own fuel pump, stuff like that, this is the way to do it. So let me explain here. So I tapped into this signal wire right here. That sends, when the car is on, when I turn the car on, it sends a certain amount of power up into this relay. So what a relay does is it normally has 4 to 5 outputs. 4 of them really matter. Let me just take that out for now. And what it does is it's basically got a switch in here that flips back and forth, on, off, on, off, on, off. It flips on when it sees a certain amount of voltage coming to it. So that's what this wire does. This wire gets hot when the car is turned on. The car automatically will send that signal just because that's how this car is built. So I'm tapping into that wire. You could use any wire. You could use a wire from under the dashboard, wherever you want. Okay, so then that wire comes into your relay, and it goes into this side of the relay right here. Most of these shaped relays, if you have one that's this shape, it's going to be the same mapping. So it's the bottom right hand if you're looking at it from the bottom. That's where you plug in your hot. Okay, then the other side of the relay has to go to ground so it can make a circuit. So this wire runs off, and I just have it grounded out on the frame of the car right here. So you have hot and ground. So now when I turn the car on, the thing sees a full 12 volts coming into the relay will see it, and it flips that magnet. Well, what's that magnet do? It connects basically this prong with this prong. You could imagine that inside here, it's just bridging a connection, so this connects to this. So what I've done here is I've plugged in 12 volts. This wire right here that runs out of this bottom one is 12 volts. It's running up and into the battery right there. And this is like a real use case scenario that you would do. You run a wire directly from your battery so you don't have to fiddle with any other electronics. And it goes into the bottom of this. So now, right now, if I take my multimeter, it's grounded out on the frame of the car right here. If I touch it to right here, this wire right here, you're gonna see that it's reading 0, okay? Now I'm gonna go ahead and throw this inside here, set the camera up on a tripod, and I will hit the button on the inside of the car, and you'll see this thing switch to 12, because what it's gonna do is, signal is gonna come through this wire, up into the multimeter, or up into the relay, flip the switch inside the relay, which is then gonna send power from here to here, which will then send it to my multimeter. Okay, so I'm inside the car now. I'm gonna go ahead and hit the power button. Look in the top left of your screen, you'll see the multimeter, and listen for a little click sound. That's gonna be the relay opening up, sending power through. So you hear that little click, and then the power came through, and now we're at nearly 12 volts. I don't think this battery's fully charged, but that's the idea. So let me wire this up a little bit more to a fan so I can fully show you guys how to use this thing. Okay, so for this demonstration, just pretend that there's like a radiator there and the fan's on the radiator. Obviously, we wouldn't leave that fan there. This is just for the demonstration. But the wiring is legit. So the wiring goes in the fan there, comes up. The ground goes to just a solid ground for the car. So I just grounded it out to the battery. The hot wire goes to this other wire that we used to have the volt meter, the multimeter, hooked up to. So it's right there. So the idea is, once again, to slam this into the heads of people that are trying to learn, signal wire comes up and it says, hey, I have power. It goes to here. This is grounded out. It flips the switch in here and says, all right, it's go time. It sends the power that's coming from this wire, which we connected to the battery over there, to this wire. So it's basically like saying these two are connected, which means that my fan is connected to the battery and to ground, so it will turn on. So I'm gonna go ahead and set up the camera and go turn on the car and show you how it automatically turns on. Okay, so the whole purpose of doing something like this is so when I just get in my car casually, I hit the button for power. Now my fan turns on for my car, because the next thing that I'm going to hit is going to be the engine on, and then obviously I want my fan to be on. Some fans are turned on only when the coolant gets cool enough, but in this car, it's race car mode, you just turn the fan on right when the car turns on. So that's the idea. Now when I go ahead and I turn it off, car's off, fan's off, nothing to worry about. This same type of thing applies to so many different things that you would want to do in your car. If you're ever like, I want to add that thing to my car, but I don't have power, this is how you do it the proper way. When I was younger, I used to just like rip out the cigarette lighter charger and like pull T-power off of that into a million different things. And obviously that won't work in the long run. So that's how you do that. So the next thing I got to do is set this up so I can splice my signal wire into multiple relays and get that all set up so we can start sending power to a bunch of different things all at once. Managed to distribute the power signal pretty well. So here's what we got. It comes out of the fuse box, the BRZ fuse box, runs down and out, and then I zip tied it to the side here in case it gets pulled on too hard. That way it won't kind of like fly out of there. Comes up and then comes into a piece of that distribution board that I showed you guys earlier. Here's another piece too. This is the piece that I cut off. Connected it to the post here, and then it distributes it to 1, 2, 3, 4 of these, which then come to kind of a block of relays. I just electrical taped all these relays together, and all those relays are then getting this signal from the same spot on each of them. So it's all nice and tidy and clean. The next thing we have to do is distribute the ground. So this will get ground from anywhere on the car, it doesn't really matter, and then it's going to distribute it all four, and it'll plug into right there, and that'll get our relays set up so that all four of these relays are going to turn on at the exact same time when we send a signal to this signal wire. All right, same stuff for the negative side, and it's looking pretty good. So that would go to anywhere on the block or anything else like that, and it provides a negative signal to all of those. I'm gonna have to throw some electrical tape between some of these connections so none of them bump into each other, especially these ones that go right here. They could easily hit these ones, but I'll get that figured out when we do the next thing. So ECU, coil pack and injectors, fan, fuel pump. That's my idea. I'm gonna write it on the bottom here so I know, and then we'll go ahead and start wiring this stuff up so ECU and fuel pump. So injectors and coil packs are some of these right here, and ECU is all this stuff right there. There's also some hardwire stuff that goes to the ECU. Man, I have a box, like a ECU box for this thing. It's nice. It's off of a C300, but I left it at home, unfortunately. So this might look a little messy in the end, but it'll be totally legit. So I'm gonna go ahead and start figuring out the ECU wiring so we can have the switched wiring, and that's the plan. I just finished running the power to the ECU. So this distribution block right here is all the powered ECU wires basically that need power when the car is turned on. So this is the main power wire. It runs out and to our first fuse. So when this is just a temporary wire going to power right now, but it'll work for right now. So when I hit the switch on the inside, that'll flip that relay, which will send power to the distribution block, which sends power to all the necessary ECU wires, except for two, which are constant to power. So these are plugged into the battery right now. It's two wires that come together into one connection, into one more wire that wraps back around. And I'm gonna get one of those little plastic wire cover things that looks all nice and keeps things looking clean, and I'll run all that around when we get done. But there's no reason to do it right now. So that runs back and into there. So it's power all the time. There are two wires to this ECU that need to have power all the time. Last few ECU wires I'm gonna do soon here there's two grounds right here, and there are a bunch of grounds right here. And not all of these are exactly necessary, but I have going a little overkill on these. And then we have our starter signal, which we will work on right after that. So starter signal is how we're going to start the car, tell the car to crank over, and that is this big wire right here and this little wire right here. This one tells the ECU to change. This has an electronic throttle, so it will kind of mess with the throttle a little bit, and then this one will actually start cranking the car. This messes with the throttle a little bit to try and get it to start up a little bit easier. So that is what we still have to do. But before I go ahead and do those ground connections, can you hear the geese? Anyway, sorry. I want to go ahead and show people how to do this in depth. I just want to go over that wiring diagram. So let me get that set up. All right, this could be a little brutal because I've never done this before, but I'm going to try my best to get through this. If you're not interested in seeing this at all, there's a timestamp. I'll put it right up there. Just skip to there. That's when I'll be done with talking about all this. Okay, so if you want to learn how to wire up your own 2JZ with your ECU, you can make this run outside of a car, inside of a car, on the floor of your shop, anywhere you want to do it. It's actually very simple. Don't be intimidated. Here's what you got to do. So in the last two videos that I did on this car, or maybe the last one video, watch that to figure out how to wire up your fuel pump independently from the car, the battery, hook up, your starter hook up, your ground to your motor, those types of things. That's all handled in an episode before. This I'm gonna talk about the actual nitty-gritty of what wires you need to plug in. So this is a really cool website. I'll put a link in the description. I've actually downloaded it on my computer, so I don't actually know the URL offhand. But this guy has kind of documented what every single pin and all of these plugs that go to the ECU for the 2JZ do. So we're going to go ahead and go through them really quick. So plug B1, B2, and B3, we're not going to use at all. So I'm just going to scroll right past them. Now, one of the cool things about this site is he put everything that you need to worry about in bold. So now we're on plug 59, and the way you can tell which plug is which, I'm going to go back up to the plugs, because if you look, some of these will have blanked out spots or notches in them and everything like that. So each plug is unique, so you can just look at the plug and figure out which one's which. None of these two are the same plug. So plug 59 is the first one that you need to worry about. and we're coming down here. So 59. So when you see something in bold and you have whether it's an input or an output, we're only worried about inputting things to the ECU. If the ECU outputs information, we don't need to worry about that right now. That would be good if you wanted to try and hook up your own dash gauges and stuff like that. So this pin is connected to the battery voltage when the ignition switch is in crank position. So this is the starter wire that I showed you just earlier in this video. I believe it's the only one on the 59 plug that we mess with, and that pin 2 on F59, you want to wire up to when you hit the start button on your car, or you're going to put the starter signal to power. Also put power to this thing right there, and it'll help your engine start. You don't have to have this plugged in to start the engine, I believe. So that's not power all the time. That's not switched on power. That's just power when you're trying to start the car. All right, on to pin F60, and this one's pretty easy. So and it will say in some of these at all times and stuff like that. That helps me figure out which ones are switched on power and power at all times. So F60 pin 1, so plug F60 pin 1 is your battery power. That's the power to ECU. Connect this to your battery through a 25 amp fuse at all time. So this one is an at all times connection to the power. Like there's 2 of them in this setup, so you basically connect that directly to your battery. Always leave it on. F67, this pin is connected to battery voltage at all times, so that's another one. So that's the second one. So those are the only 2 that are connected to the battery at all time. So then F68, 9, and 10, grab all of those along with 16, and that's it on F60. So 8, 9, 10, and 16, and those, you go to the switched power. So that's what I showed you with the relay and the distribution block. When you turn your car on and it's like, all right, my dash is on, and you're getting ready to start the car, that's when you should be sending power to all these things. Not when the car's off. So it's not a direct connection to the battery. It's hit a button or turn a switch or whatever. Now send power to all these things to get ready for the car to start. So then we have whatever what is this? BF1, we don't use this one, I don't believe. Input bodies. Oh, this is an alternator thing. I haven't worried about that yet. We might want to worry about that later on. It's an alternator sensor. But to start the engine, you don't have to worry about that. So here's one of the first body plugs. It's it's the second technically, and it's BF2. So BF2, you have power to coils and igniter, and then you have power to fuel injectors. These are 2 pretty important ones. These are the ones that I have pulled off on my own relay because they use a lot of power. So BF2 it's what they call a body loom plug. Anyways, it's another plug. It's unique in the car. You can find the one just by looking at the one that is configured like this. Find pins 7 and 8, and I would put them 6 and 7. I might put them on their own relay, or you might be able to share a relay with that, and they need to be powered on before you want to start the car. 8 and 9, one of these I got to be careful. Okay, 8 is the starter signal. So this is actually how you tell the engine to start. When you apply power to wire 8, it's going to try and start the car. So that, along with the very first wire I talked about, those are the 2 that you throw power to when you want to turn the car on. It'll start cranking the motor over. And if you have all these other pins plugged in the right way, it'll start the car. And then 9, switch power, blah, 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 blah. EFI made switch power. So 9 is one of the ones that you put to power when the car is trying to turn on. So it's switched on power. And then in this last plug, so sorry, that plug doesn't have a name other than BF2, but it's this one. And then the next plug looks like this guy. And there are 2 inputs here, and you can see them at the bottom. It's plug 5, BF3 5, and BF3 9, and those are switched on power. So this one's switched on power, and that one's switched on power. If you do that and you plug all those things in, so you have two wires that are run to power all the time. You have 7 or 8 wires they get power when you switch the car on. And then you have those 2 other wires that you touch to power just when you want to crank the car. If you do that mixed with running fuel through the fuel pump, and I think that's all you have to do. Am I forgetting anything else? Oops, I forgot one thing. Okay, for plug F60, pin 22 labeled EC, that needs to go to ground. But what I recommend doing is when you trace these wires down, trace where this wire goes to, and you'll see these two different wire bundles that are all basically twisted together at the end. Those two bundles both go to ground. So just take all of those wires and send the larger ones to ground, and that'll ground out all the wires in that little bundle and take care of all the grounded wires in your ECU all at once. No, I think that's it. As long as you do that and you have all that stuff, then your engine will start up. So that's how you do that. Okay, back to work. All right, next up on the wiring chopping block is the ground wires. So like I said earlier in the video, there are these two bundles of ground wires and they're all twisted together at the end. So theoretically, if you take a couple of these and send them to ground, they will all get that nice grounded connection. But it's hard to know what every single one of these white wires does. There's about 16 to 20 of them. So I'm gonna ground out a bunch of these into our other distribution block that will be for ground. I'm gonna plug all those in, and that should take care of all the grounding. All right, here we go. Grounding is done. That's the grounding block. Black wire runs around, goes down to ground over there. The, what am I looking for? The wires that go to the injectors and the coil packs and the igniter go up through here, around here, and into their very own relay right here, which gets hardwired to the power. While I was working on that, I made a mistake and I left the car on, which killed the battery. So I can't test anything for a while. Oh, look, green light over there, battery's charged. So battery's back up and charged, and I will test that in a second. The next thing I want to do is get the push to start sequence to work. So remember that one little cable I was talking about? That's the start signal cable, it's right there. This guy is the one that actually turns the starter on. And the starter needs to be hardwired to your battery, which is on a 2JZ, it's this big old black cable right here. So we got to figure out how to get that kind of over there in a nice way to get to the positive battery terminal. We'll put the battery back in now that it's charged, and we got to run a signal wire inside, and I'll show you about that in a second. Show you about that? Show you that and talk about it. Welcome to the inside of the BRZ. I need to get a new steering wheel and I need to get a new stereo. I'm putting both of those on the list. I totally forgot about those. Haven't been in here much. So I want to show you about how this works right now and how we're going to have to make it work. So the first button press of this turns on our auxiliaries. So we got things like the rear view mirror, we got the clock, dome light, some other things. Those are all on right now. Okay, now the second one, if I had my foot on the brake right now, what it's doing, or if I press it again right now, that's going to send the start signal through the BRZ CAN bus system, and we could tap into that. So that start signal is running right now, and it's saying engine start, engine start, engine start, engine start. And it doesn't stop doing that until it sees RPMs come from the Subaru engine. Problem there is we can never tell it when there's RPMs from the Subaru engine. So that's a bit of a bummer. So the car thinks it's basically trying to start itself right now. Not a big problem to leave it that way. It'll let us drive around and stuff like that, and some of these things will work. But, oh, I can hear the ECU for the 2JZ running right now. So, so that's a problem. So basically, if we did that and we wired that start sequence into our 2JZ and we press the button, it would start the 2JZ up, and then it would keep trying to start it, and the starter would grind and everything like that. It wouldn't work. So the way to do this, I talked to my buddy Kyle about it. This is a pretty cool way too. And if somebody tries to steal my car that's not a viewer, they won't know how to do this, but you guys will know how to do it. So I guess you can steal my car. I'm gonna rip this whole thing off. I'm gonna get underneath this button right here, and it's just a button. And I'm gonna make this button our start signal button. So I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to hotwire that up, but it might involve another relay. But basically, the starting sequence, so this turns off the car. That just turned off the ECU. That would stop the car, which is good. That's exactly what we want. So then the way that we're starting it again is it'd be button press 1, button press 2, and then starter button. Brum, 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 and then we're good to start driving. So that's the idea. I'm going to go ahead and pull this thing apart, find out what wires in here do what, so I can turn it into a good old-fashioned button, and then I got to run some wires out into the engine bay and into the 2JZ starter signal. very frustrating hour later, but I got it all wired up. So well, it's not all wired up. Most of it's wired up. Hotline is coming straight from the battery right now, so this is gonna work without the car on. So hotline comes in right here, runs into our switch hot lead, which then goes to the other side of the switch, runs into the relay, and then this goes to our ground. The big problem that I had for a long time that had me stumped was I tried to use a ground from this wiring bundle, and for some reason it just wasn't giving a good enough ground signal. So anyways, you're gonna hear the relay click, and that's when I'm pressing that button underneath. So when that relay clicks, that's when we're gonna be sending power to our starter signal. So now I just have to run a power cable back out the car. So I'm gonna go back out the same way through the hood, and then that'll go out to the starter signal out there. Our starting mod is done. Everything's all wrapped up in there. I haven't tested anything yet because I can't yet. So I wrapped all that up. I came over here and then I ran the hot wire. So I'm just, for the time being, I'm using the fuel pump relay. I don't know what I'll use in the end. Maybe the fan relay, because I don't know. Anyways, so hot wire comes out of there. Well, no, hot wire comes off the power right here into here, and then when it gets switched by the relay, it'll send hot power down into our switch there, and then when you hit the button, it'll send it back to the starter signal. So then I had to run a wire back, and it runs back there in that mess of things over to here, where it comes in right here and splices in. So that's the starter signal wire for the ECU right there, starter signal wire for also the ECU right here. It's a much heavier duty one, and that's that. So now the last piece of the puzzle is this actual starter wire. This is like the big Mondo thing that needs to be plugged into the battery. So I'm gonna figure out how to get that over here and connect to the terminal in some clean way for, it's basically temporary. So what I'm trying to do here is, while all the wires are exposed, get everything wired up, give it a test, and then later on we can come back and clean it all up. But for now, it's just we gotta get it working first. Okay, moment of truth time. I'm gonna go ahead and try and start it up. Well, okay, so it's not gonna start because we don't have any fuel running, but the idea is that the ECU will turn on, we'll hear that, and then when I hit the crank button, the engine will crank. That's what I'm really hoping for. In a later episode, we'll wire up a fuel pump. We're gonna custom wire our fuel pump anyways, because we want to improve the wiring since we're upgrading our fuel pump. So let's jump in here. Okay, light on. Here we go. So first button, start, should do nothing other than that stuff. That's good. Why is it beeping? Probably because the doors are open. Cool. It doesn't care about that door for some reason. All right, so now the second one should turn on the dash. And it didn't turn on the ECU. All right, time to troubleshoot. The ground wire for the ground bus or terminal or whatever, the distribution was completely unhooked. So once I hook that back up, you can test it right here. Then you can hear the ECU turn on. So I'll hook that back up and then we'll give it a try. All right, here we go. Try number 2. I can hear the ECU running for the 2JZ. So let's go ahead and try our button here. Fingers crossed. Yeah, baby. That is so sweet. And then if I turn it off, hit the button, doesn't do anything. One click, doesn't do anything. Second click. And you can also put your foot on the brake and just tap it once, and then that gets you into this mode. And then, haha! Sweet! And the next one, I'll make that actually make the engine start. Alright guys, well we did it. It's not all cleaned up yet, but it is wired the way I wanted to wire it. It's sending signal wires from inside the dash, inside that area, out here to a relay bus, and we're using nice power distribution methods. It'll all clean up very, very easily and very nicely, and I have a feeling that it will be very durable and it'll last a long time, as well as it'll be easy to troubleshoot. When I had to go fix some of the problems, like when I tried it the time before the starter button worked, you know, it was very, very fast to find out what was wrong. So that's really cool. I'm gonna need a couple more like little distribution blocks, which I'll go buy some more of that same thing that I bought to do some of the grounding work. But man, it's really coming along. So that's basically done. To be plugged in is still the fuel pump and the fan. We'll do the fan later on when we have a front of a car and a radiator and stuff like that. But very, very soon we'll do the fuel pump because I got to run fuel lines, which I think will be very fun. And then we're going to rewire the fuel pump wiring coming from our relays up front. So look for that in a very, very soon episode. Very, very soon. Is that the right word? Sorry guys, I'm very, very tired. This took a lot longer than I thought. It's a little bit past 1 a.m. So yeah, anyways, I didn't get enough sleep for this. But thank you guys so much for watching. Big thanks to our sponsor, Leatherman. I had a lot of fun using that new Leatherman tool while I was working on this build, and it's quite an honor to be sponsored by Leatherman, to have a sponsored episode by Leatherman, to be very honest. So that was very cool. So thanks to Leatherman for doing that. And remember guys, there's a link in the description. Check out the Leatherman tool tales and maybe enter your own if you have a good story to tell. It's very, very cool. And what else? If you like this build and you like what we're doing, we're going to try to stay very focused on the BRZ. I think I have all the parts and all the stuff on the way to get this build just all the way through. So I'm super excited. There's a lot of work still to be done, but it's really, really coming along. But if you like this build and you want to help out and support, the new BS for Build BRZ shirts are in the store now. So head over to bsforbuild.com, scroll down the shop and pick yourself up one of those. And if you want to find us in more places, we are BS for Build on Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, Twitter, all that good stuff. Follow us on your preferred social media method, and I will try and keep you guys up to date the best I can. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Please remember to like and subscribe. Peace!